Welcome back to the Metrology and Measurement course. Today I am going to discuss about the standard classification of standard, and I am Dr. Gautam Pal, Associate Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering of University of Engineering and Management, Kolkata. Now, I have already discussed that what is line standard and N standard, and what are different classification of standard. That is the international standard, primary standard, secondary standard, and the working standard. So in case of line standard, I have talked that uh, line standard are normal linear scales may be considered as a line standard where there is no particular datum is inbuilt in this line standard, but in case of end standard, datum are inbuilt in their structure. So but line standard are simple and low in cost compared to the end standard. But the accuracy of end standard is very high within close tolerance. It's up to plus minus 0.001 millimeter. Now, if you consider the classification of standard, then it is international standard, primary standard, secondary standard, and working standard. But in some books it is also mentioned that the primary standard, secondary standard, tertiary standard, and working standard. So international standards, it is defined by the international agreement maintained by International Bureau of Weight and Measures in Paris, and primary standard are maintained by National Bureau of Standard used for verification and calibration of secondary standard, and secondary standards are used in the NPL laboratories and also used for the calibration for the working standard. And working standard are principal tools in measurement laboratories. So we shall discuss this elaborately, what is the classification of standard, and in this case international standard are material standard preserved under most careful condition, and these are used directly for measurement but are not used for measurement. Actually, these are not used directly for measurement but are used in 10 to 20 years for calibrating primary standards. After 10 to 20 years, the primary standard are calibrated with the help of this international standard, as for example international prototype meter, imperial standard yard, etc. That I have discussed. That is, the international prototype meter is made up of platinum iridium, so we cannot use such standard for our daily use, and that's why we have to maintain the primary standard from this. An imperial standard yard is made up of bronze bar of particular length, that is 38 inches, and gold plugs are used at a half-inch distance in the oil which is cut at the neutral axis. Now, since international standards are to be maintained at a particular place due to the ambient condition, at a particular ambient condition and under some surveillance, so this we need to make the replica of this international standard and maintained by National Bureau of Standard, used for verification and calibration of secondary standard. These are close copies of international standards with respect to design, material, and length. And any error existing in these standards is recorded by comparison with the international standard. That means international standards are so costly and so susceptible to the ambient temperature. It should be maintained in a particular place, and this cannot be used for the measurement purpose, but within 10 to after 10 to 20 years, these standards are used for the calibration of the primary standard. And this primary standard are maintained in the National Bureau of Standard, and error existing in the standard is recorded by the comparison with international standard after 10 to 20 years. Now, secondary standard are the reference standard employed by National Physical Laboratory and are the first standard to be used for reference in laboratories and workshops. These are made as the close copies of primary standard, and these are calibrated with respect to the primary standard and kept as a reference for comparison with working standard, and they are used for the calibration of the working standard. So here working standard we are normally using in our workshop or in our metrology laboratory in industry, and these are similar to the design of primary and secondary standard, but they are made of less cost and they are made of low grade material. They are used for general application in metrology laboratory. So far I have discussed about the various standards, that is material standard, that is imperial standard yard, international prototype meter, and also the line standard, N standard, and the wavelength standard, and next the classification of standard, in which the international standard, primary standard, secondary standard, and the working standard has been discussed. So thank you.